Sarah Martinez walked through the military base entrance for the first time, her heart racing with excitement and nerves. At 22 years old, she had just graduated from the military academy with top honors, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. The base was massive, with buildings stretching as far as she could see and soldiers moving with purpose in every direction. She clutched her assignment papers tightly in her hand. After months of waiting, she had finally received her posting to Fort Harrison, one of the most prestigious military installations in the country. This wasn't just any assignment. She was being placed in the elite reconnaissance unit, something most soldiers could only dream of. As Sarah made her way to the administration building, she couldn't help but notice the stares she received. Some were curious, others seemed less welcoming. She had expected this. Being a young woman in a field dominated by men meant she would have to prove herself every single day. Her father, a retired colonel, had warned her about this during their last conversation. "Remember, Mija," he had said, using the Spanish nickname he'd called her since childhood. "They're not going to make it easy for you, but you're stronger than you know, and you have something special that they can't take away from you." The administration building was buzzing with activity. Soldiers moved in and out, carrying folders and talking in hushed tones. Sarah approached the reception desk where a stern-looking sergeant sat reviewing documents. "Excuse me, Sergeant," Sarah said, standing at attention. "I'm Second Lieutenant Martinez, reporting for duty." The sergeant looked up, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "Martinez? You're the new recruit for Captain Johnson's unit?" "Yes, Sergeant." He handed her a manila folder and a map of the base. "Your quarters are in Building C, room 247. Captain Johnson wants to see you at 800 hours tomorrow morning. Don't be late." Sarah took the materials and headed toward the residential area. The base was like a small city, complete with its own stores, cafeteria, and recreational facilities. As she walked, she passed groups of soldiers engaged in various activities. Some were training on the obstacle course. Others were sitting outside their barracks, talking and laughing. Building C was a 3-story brick structure that housed junior officers. Sarah climbed to the second floor and found her room. It was small but functional, with a single bed, a desk, a closet, and a small window that looked out onto the training grounds. She set her duffel bag on the bed and began unpacking her belongings. As she arranged her clothes in the closet, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. Growing up in a military family meant moving frequently, but it also meant being exposed to different cultures and ways of life. Her mother was from Puerto Rico and her father was Mexican-American. They had taught her to be proud of her heritage while also embracing her role as an American soldier. The path to this moment hadn't been easy. At the military academy, she had faced skepticism from instructors who questioned whether she had the physical and mental strength required for military service. Some of her male classmates had made comments about her being there to fill a quota, rather than because of her abilities. But Sarah had persevered, graduating third in her class and earning commendations for leadership and tactical thinking. That evening, Sarah decided to explore the base and get familiar with her new environment. She walked to the dining facility, a large building that served hundreds of soldiers each day. The smell of food and the sound of conversations in multiple languages filled the air. She grabbed a tray and got in line behind several other soldiers. "You're new here," said the soldier in front of her, a tall man with kind eyes and a friendly smile. "I'm Lieutenant Rodriguez, but everyone calls me Rico." "Second Lieutenant Martinez," Sarah replied. "I just arrived today." "Martinez? Are you related to Colonel Martinez? I heard he was quite the legend around here years ago." Sarah smiled. "He's my father." Rico's eyes widened with respect. "Your father saved my uncle's life in Afghanistan." "Small world. Welcome to Fort Harrison, Lieutenant. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." As they found seats at a nearby table, Rico introduced Sarah to several other officers. The conversation was light and welcoming, covering topics from the best places to eat off base to the upcoming training exercises. Sarah began to feel more comfortable, thinking that perhaps her integration into this new environment would be smoother than she had anticipated. After dinner, Sarah returned to her room and prepared for the next day. She laid out her uniform, polished her boots, and reviewed the materials the sergeant had given her. The reconnaissance unit she was joining had a reputation for excellence and innovation. They were often called upon for the most challenging missions, requiring both physical prowess and intellectual acuity. As she settled into bed, Sarah reflected on her goals for this assignment. She wanted to prove that she belonged here, not because of her father's reputation, but because of her own skills and dedication. She also hoped to eventually lead her own unit someday, paving the way for other young women who might follow in her footsteps. The sounds of the base at night were different from what she was used to. There were footsteps in the hallway, distant conversations, and the occasional vehicle passing by outside. But there was also a sense of security and purpose that she found comforting. Tomorrow would be her first real test. Meeting Captain Johnson and the rest of her unit would determine how the next phase of her military career would unfold. Sarah knew that first impressions mattered, especially in an environment where trust and respect had to be earned rather than given. She thought about her parents, who were probably worrying about her right now. They had always been supportive of her dreams, even when those dreams took her far from home and into potentially dangerous situations. Her mother had cried when Sarah left for the academy, but she had also been the first to congratulate her when she graduated. As sleep finally came, Sarah dreamed of the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. She was ready to begin this new chapter of her life, determined to honor both her family's legacy and her own aspirations for service to her country. The alarm clock rang at 05:30 hours, but Sarah was already awake. She had been lying in bed for the past hour, running through potential scenarios for her first meeting with Captain Johnson. She got up, made her bed with military precision, and began her morning routine. After a quick shower and breakfast, Sarah made her way to the reconnaissance unit's headquarters. The building was newer than most others on the base, with state-of-the-art equipment and technology visible through the windows. As she approached the entrance, she saw several soldiers engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion. "There's no way a rookie is going to keep up with our training schedule," one of them was saying. "Especially not someone who probably got here because of Daddy's connections." Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but she maintained her composure and walked past them into the building. The interior was impressive, with maps covering the walls and computer terminals displaying various data streams. She approached the reception area where a corporal was typing on a keyboard. "Second Lieutenant Martinez reporting to see Captain Johnson," she announced. The corporal looked up and pointed down a hallway. "Conference room B down the hall and to your left. They're waiting for you." As Sarah walked down the hallway, she could hear voices coming from the conference room. She knocked on the door and heard someone call, "Enter." She opened the door and stepped inside to find 5 men in uniform seated around a large table. Maps and documents were spread across the surface, and a large screen on the wall displayed satellite imagery. "Second Lieutenant Martinez, sir," she said, standing at attention and saluting. A man with graying hair and sharp eyes stood up from the head of the table. "At ease, Lieutenant. I'm Captain Johnson. Welcome to Alpha Reconnaissance Unit." He gestured toward the other men. "These are your new teammates, Lieutenant Stevens, Lieutenant Chen, Sergeant Williams, and Sergeant Thompson." Each man nodded as his name was called, but Sarah could sense a coolness in their reception. She had expected this and was prepared to work harder than anyone else to earn their respect. Captain Johnson pulled out a chair. "Have a seat, Martinez. Let's go over your background and discuss your role in the unit." For the next hour, they reviewed Sarah's academic achievements, her performance at the academy, and her specialized training in languages and technology. She spoke fluent Spanish and Portuguese and had advanced certifications in computer systems and satellite communications. Her scores in tactical planning and strategic thinking were among the highest in her graduating class. "Impressive credentials," Lieutenant Stevens commented, though his tone suggested skepticism. "But how do we know you can handle the physical demands of our missions?" "I scored in the top 5% on all physical fitness tests at the academy," Sarah replied confidently. "I also completed the Advanced Survival Training course and the Mountain Warfare program." Sergeant Williams leaned forward. "Academy training is one thing. Real missions are completely different. We operate in hostile environments where mistakes can get people killed." Captain Johnson raised his hand to stop the interrogation. "Martinez will have the opportunity to prove herself like everyone else did when they joined this unit. Our next training exercise is in 2 weeks. Until then, she'll participate in our daily routines and familiarize herself with our protocols." After the meeting, Lieutenant Chen offered to show Sarah around the facility. Unlike the others, he seemed genuinely welcoming and spoke to her with respect. As they walked through different departments, he explained the unit's history and mission. "We handle reconnaissance missions that require specialized skills," he said as they entered a room filled with high-tech equipment. "Sometimes we're gathering intelligence. Other times we're providing support for larger operations. The work is challenging, but it's some of the most important stuff happening in the military right now." They stopped at a training area where several soldiers were practicing with various weapons and equipment. Sarah watched as they moved through complex scenarios, communicating through hand signals and working as a coordinated team. "How long have you been with the unit?" Sarah asked. 3 years. "It took me about 6 months to really feel like part of the team. These guys are tough, but they're also the best at what they do. Once you prove you can keep up, they'll have your back no matter what." That afternoon, Sarah participated in her first training session with the unit. They started with physical conditioning, which included running, obstacle courses, and strength training. Sarah kept pace with the others, though she could tell they were testing her limits. When it came to technical skills, she excelled in communications and navigation, impressing even the skeptical Sergeant Williams. During a break, she overheard Stevens and Thompson talking near the water station. "She's in better shape than I expected," Stevens admitted. "But physical fitness isn't everything. Wait until we get to the psychological pressure tests. I give her 2 weeks before she requests a transfer," Thompson replied. "This isn't a place for people who need special treatment." Sarah pretended not to hear them, but their words stung. She knew they were trying to intimidate her, but she also understood that their skepticism came from a place of concern for the unit's effectiveness. In their world, trust was earned through shared hardship and proven reliability. That evening, Sarah called her parents from her room. Her mother's voice was warm and reassuring, while her father offered practical advice about navigating military politics and earning respect from fellow soldiers. "Remember that every soldier in that unit was once where you are now," her father said. "They all had to prove themselves to the people who came before them. Don't take their challenges personally, but don't let them intimidate you either." Over the following days, Sarah threw herself into every aspect of the training with determination and focus. She studied mission reports from previous operations, memorized protocols and procedures, and spent extra time in the gym working on her physical conditioning. She also made an effort to learn about her teammates as individuals, understanding that building personal relationships was just as important as demonstrating professional competence. Lieutenant Chen became an informal mentor, offering insights into the unit's culture and dynamics. He explained that Stevens had lost a close friend during a mission 2 years ago, when a new team member made a critical error. This helped Sarah understand why he was so protective of the unit's standards. Sergeant Williams, she learned, had grown up in a tough neighborhood and had worked his way up through the ranks without any family connections to the military. His skepticism towards Sarah wasn't necessarily about gender, but about his perception that she might have had advantages that he never had. By the end of her first week, Sarah had begun to find her rhythm within the unit. She was contributing meaningfully to planning sessions, and her language skills had already proven valuable in analyzing intelligence reports. The physical training was intense, but she was keeping up and even excelling in some areas. However, she knew that the real test was still coming. The training exercise that Captain Johnson had mentioned would be her opportunity to prove that she belonged not just on paper, but in the field where decisions mattered and lives could be at stake. 2 weeks into her assignment, Sarah felt more confident about her place in the unit, but she knew the upcoming training exercise would be the real test. Captain Johnson had described it as a comprehensive field operation that would simulate real-world conditions and challenges. The exercise would last 5 days and take place in a remote mountain region known for its harsh terrain and unpredictable weather. The morning before departure, the team gathered for a final briefing. The mission scenario involved infiltrating a simulated enemy compound, gathering intelligence, and extracting without detection. Each team member had a specific role, and Sarah had been assigned as the communications specialist and secondary navigator. "This isn't a game," Captain Johnson emphasized as he reviewed the mission parameters. "The conditions will be challenging and will be evaluated by external observers who don't know any of you personally. Your performance here will determine your future with this unit." As the team prepared their equipment, Sarah noticed that Stevens and Thompson were still maintaining their distance from her. They worked efficiently but barely acknowledged her presence. Williams, however, had begun to show grudging respect for her technical skills, occasionally asking for her input on equipment setup. The team departed Fort Harrison at dawn in 2 military vehicles loaded with gear and supplies. The drive to the training area took several hours, winding through increasingly remote terrain. Sarah used the time to review maps and communication protocols, while also observing the dynamics between her teammates. Chen, who was driving the vehicle she was in, pointed out various landmarks and shared stories about previous training exercises. The key to success out here isn't just individual skill, he explained. It's about how well the team functions as a unit. Everyone has to trust that the others will do their jobs. When they arrived at the base camp, Sarah was struck by the rugged beauty of the landscape. Mountains stretched in every direction, covered with dense forests and rocky outcroppings. The air was thin and cold, and she could see why this location had been chosen for advanced training. The team set up their temporary headquarters in a clearing surrounded by tall pine trees. They would operate from this location for the first 2 days before moving to a more advanced position. Sarah quickly established the communication equipment, testing frequencies and ensuring clear contact with the command center back at Fort Harrison. The first phase of the exercise involved reconnaissance of the target area, which was located approximately 15 miles away through difficult terrain. The team would need to move undetected while gathering information about the simulated enemy positions and defenses. Captain Johnson divided the team into 2 pairs, with Sarah partnered with Sergeant Williams. At first, she was nervous about this pairing, given Williams' earlier skepticism about her abilities. But as they began moving through the forest, she realized that he was an excellent teacher, who pushed her to perform at her highest level. "Stay low and watch where you step," Williams whispered as they navigated through thick underbrush. "Every sound you make could give away our position. In a real situation, that could mean the difference between life and death." Sarah followed his guidance carefully, adjusting her movement patterns and becoming more aware of her surroundings. She carried the communication equipment and a detailed map, while Williams handled navigation and security. As they progressed toward their assigned observation point, she began to understand why Williams had such high standards for the unit. The target compound was situated in a valley surrounded by hills, making it an ideal defensive position. Sarah and Williams spent several hours observing and documenting the layout, guard patterns, and potential entry points. She sketched detailed diagrams while Williams provided tactical analysis. "Your drawing skills are impressive," Williams commented quietly as he reviewed her work. "These will be very useful for planning the infiltration phase." It was the first genuine compliment he had given her, and Sarah felt a surge of pride. She was beginning to prove herself not through grand gestures, but through consistent competence and attention to detail. As they prepared to return to base camp, Williams received a radio message that changed everything. One of the other team members had suffered an injury during their reconnaissance mission, and the exercise parameters had shifted. The team would need to adapt their plans and continue with reduced personnel. "This is where things get interesting," Williams said with a slight smile. "Real missions never go according to plan. Let's see how well you handle unexpected challenges." The journey back to base camp was more difficult than the outbound trip. The weather had deteriorated, with rain and wind making visibility poor and footing treacherous. Sarah's equipment pack seemed to get heavier with each mile, but she refused to ask for help or show any signs of struggle. When they reached the temporary headquarters, they found the rest of the team dealing with the injury situation. Lieutenant Stevens had twisted his ankle badly while climbing over a rocky area, and although it wasn't serious enough to end the exercise, it would limit his mobility for the remainder of the mission. Captain Johnson gathered the team for an emergency planning session. "We have 2 options," he explained. "We can call for medical evacuation and end the exercise, or we can adapt our tactics and continue with modified objectives." The team unanimously chose to continue, but this meant redistributing responsibilities and adjusting roles. Sarah found herself taking on additional duties, including some of the navigation tasks that Stevens would have handled. That night, as the team prepared for the next phase of the exercise, Sarah reflected on how much she had learned in just 2 days. The physical challenges were demanding, but she was discovering that mental resilience and adaptability were equally important. She was also beginning to understand the deep bonds that formed between soldiers who depended on each other in difficult situations. Williams approached her as she was checking the communication. Equipment one final time before sleep. Martinez, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. I've been giving you a hard time since you arrived, and that wasn't fair. You're proving that you belong here. Sarah looked up from her work, surprised by his admission. Thank you, Sergeant. I understand why you had to test me. Standards exist for a reason. They do, he agreed. But I also let my own prejudices cloud my judgment. You've got the skills and the attitude we need in this unit. Tomorrow's going to be the real challenge, though. The infiltration phase will test everything we've learned. As Sarah settled into her sleeping bag, she felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with anticipation. She had made significant progress in earning the respect of her teammates, but she knew that the most difficult parts of the exercise were still ahead. The infiltration mission would require precise coordination, split-second decision-making, and absolute trust between team members. The sound of wind in the trees and the distant calls of nocturnal animals created a natural soundtrack for the remote camp. Sarah closed her eyes and focused on the challenges that awaited them in the morning, knowing that success in the coming days would determine not just her standing with the unit, but her entire future in military service. The third day of the exercise began before dawn, with a light drizzle that made everything slippery and cold. Sarah woke to the sound of Captain Johnson quietly moving around the camp, checking equipment and reviewing the day's mission plan. Today would be the infiltration phase, the most critical and dangerous part of the entire exercise. The team gathered around a detailed map spread on a waterproof tarp. Captain Johnson pointed to various locations as he explained the modified plan. With Stephen's injured ankle, they would need to approach the target compound from a different angle, using a route that required more technical climbing, but offered better concealment. Martinez, you'll be taking point on communications during the infiltration, Captain Johnson announced. We need constant contact with base command, and your equipment setup yesterday was flawless. Williams and Thompson will handle entry. Chen will provide overwatch, and I'll coordinate the overall operation. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Being assigned to take point on communications meant the team was trusting her with one of the most critical aspects of the mission. Any failure in communication could compromise the entire operation and put lives at risk. The team spent an hour conducting final equipment checks and reviewing contingency plans. Sarah tested every piece of communication gear twice, ensuring that backup systems were in place and frequency channels were clear. She also reviewed the extraction protocols with each team member, making sure everyone understood the emergency procedures. As they prepared to move out, Stevens pulled Sarah aside. Despite his injury, he would remain at the base camp to coordinate with external command and provide tactical support via radio. Martinez, he said, his tone more respectful than she had ever heard from him. I've been watching your work over the past few days. You've got good instincts and solid technical skills, but today is going to test more than that. When things get complicated out there, and they will, trust your training and trust your team. The journey to the target area took 3 hours through increasingly difficult terrain. The team moved in single file, maintaining radio silence and using hand signals for communication. Sarah carried not only her own equipment but also backup communication gear that could mean the difference between mission success and failure. The rain had stopped, but the ground remained muddy and treacherous. Sarah found herself focusing intensely on each step, aware that a single mistake could create noise that would compromise their position. Behind her, she could hear the almost silent movements of her teammates, each one a professional who had perfected the art of moving undetected through hostile territory. When they reached the observation point overlooking the compound, Sarah immediately began setting up the communication equipment while the others took positions for surveillance. The target facility looked exactly as they had observed 2 days earlier, but now they could see additional details that would be crucial for the infiltration. Base command, this is Alpha Team, Sarah whispered into her headset. We are in position and beginning final reconnaissance. The response came back clear and immediate. Alpha Team, Base Command, you are clear to proceed with Phase 2. Captain Johnson studied the compound through binoculars while Chen and Williams identified the best entry points. The facility was surrounded by a chain-link fence with razor wire, and guard patrols followed predictable patterns that created brief windows of opportunity. There, Williams pointed to a section of fence near a maintenance building. The guards pass that area every 12 minutes. If we time it right, we'll have 8 minutes to get in, reach the target building, and establish our position. The plan was elegant in its simplicity but would require perfect execution. Chen would remain in overwatch position to provide security and emergency support. Williams and Thompson would handle the actual entry into the target building, while Captain Johnson coordinated movements and Sarah maintained communications with all elements. As they prepared to move, Sarah checked her equipment one final time. She wore a lightweight headset that would allow her to communicate with the entire team while keeping her hands free for other tasks. The radio pack on her back contained the primary communication gear, and she carried backup equipment in case of equipment failure. "Remember," Captain Johnson said quietly, "this is still an exercise, but we treat it like the real thing. No unnecessary risks, but we execute the mission as planned." The team moved down toward the compound in carefully coordinated stages. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as they approached the fence line, but her training kicked in and she focused on maintaining clear communication with all team elements. "Overwatch, this is base element," she whispered. "Guard patrol just passed checkpoint Alpha. You have 8 minutes." Chen's voice came back immediately. "Copy base element. Beginning approach now." Sarah watched as Williams and Thompson moved like shadows toward the fence. They had practiced this type of entry dozens of times, but seeing them executed under realistic conditions was impressive. Within 2 minutes, they had created an opening in the fence and were moving toward the target building. "Entry team, this is base element," Sarah transmitted. "You have 6 minutes remaining." The next few minutes felt like hours as Sarah coordinated communications between the different elements of the team. She tracked the guard patrols, monitored the entry team's progress, and maintained contact with base command. The multiple conversations happening simultaneously required intense concentration and perfect timing. Then something went wrong. The guard patrol pattern changed unexpectedly, and 2 guards were approaching the area where Williams and Thompson were still working inside the target building. "Entry team, this is Overwatch." Chen's urgent voice came through the radio. "You have unexpected company approaching from the north." 2 guards moving fast. Sarah felt a moment of panic but immediately focused on her training. "Base command, this is Alpha team. We have a situation developing. Requesting guidance." "Alpha team, base command. Handle according to training protocols. You are cleared to adapt as necessary." Captain Johnson was already moving, repositioning to create a distraction that would draw the guards away from the target building. Sarah coordinated his movements while maintaining contact with Williams and Thompson, who were still inside gathering the required intelligence. "Entry team, you need to move now," she transmitted. "Exit through the south window and proceed to rally point 2. The next few minutes were a blur of coordinated movement and precise communication. Sarah guided each team member through the compound while tracking multiple threats and maintaining contact with all elements. Her training at the academy had prepared her for complex scenarios, but the reality of coordinating a live operation was far more intense than any simulation. When the team finally reached the extraction point, Sarah felt a surge of relief and accomplishment. They had successfully completed the infiltration, gathered the required intelligence, and extracted without being detected by the guard force. "Outstanding work." "Martinez," Captain Johnson said as they regrouped in a secure area, "your communication coordination under pressure was textbook perfect. That situation could have gone very badly without precise coordination." Williams nodded in agreement. "When those guards changed their pattern, you adapted immediately and kept everyone informed. That's exactly what we need in this unit." Even Thompson, who had been the most skeptical of her abilities, offered genuine praise. "I've seen experienced soldiers freeze up in situations like that. You kept your head and did your job. Respect." As the team prepared for the final phase of the exercise, Sarah realized that she had crossed an important threshold. She was no longer the new person trying to prove herself. She was a trusted member of the team who had demonstrated her abilities under realistic conditions. The respect she saw in her teammates' eyes was earned through competence, not given because of sympathy or lowered standards. The final 2 days of the exercise brought new challenges that tested not only individual skills, but the team's ability to function under extreme stress. Weather conditions deteriorated significantly, with heavy rain and strong winds making visibility poor and movement difficult. Sarah found herself constantly adjusting communication frequencies to maintain clear contact as atmospheric conditions interfered. With radio signals, the team had successfully completed the infiltration phase, but now they faced the most demanding part of the exercise: a long-range patrol through hostile territory, while carrying sensitive intelligence that needed to reach headquarters within a specific time frame. The scenario simulated a real-world situation where a reconnaissance team must traverse enemy-controlled areas while avoiding detection and delivering critical information. Captain Johnson gathered the team for a briefing as rain pelted their temporary shelter. We have 36 hours to reach the extraction point 60 miles from here. The route takes us through 3 different terrain types, and we'll be facing simulated enemy patrols at random intervals. This is where everything we've learned comes together. Sarah studied the route on her waterproof map case, noting the elevation changes and potential choke points where enemy forces might set up ambushes. Her role would be crucial during this phase, as she would need to maintain constant communication with headquarters, while also coordinating with the team during any contact with enemy forces. The team moved out at first light, with each member carrying a heavy pack containing essential gear and supplies. Sarah's load included not only her personal equipment, but also the primary communication gear and backup systems that could weigh up to 40 pounds. She had trained extensively with this type of load, but carrying it through difficult terrain for extended periods would test her physical conditioning. The first day's march took them through dense forest terrain where the thick canopy provided concealment, but also made navigation challenging. Sarah used her technical skills to coordinate with GPS systems and traditional map reading, ensuring the team stayed on the correct route while avoiding areas where enemy patrols were likely to be operating. Around midday, Chen, who was walking point, raised his fist to signal a halt. Through hand signals, he indicated that he had spotted movement ahead that could be an enemy patrol. The team immediately took defensive positions while Sarah prepared to coordinate any necessary communication. "Base Command, this is Alpha Team," she whispered into her headset. "We have possible enemy contact at grid reference 347521, requesting guidance on rules of engagement." The response came back quickly. "Alpha Team, Base Command. You are cleared to avoid if possible, engage if necessary. Priority is mission completion." Captain Johnson made the decision to detour around the suspected enemy position, adding 2 hours to their travel time, but avoiding a potential firefight that could compromise their mission. Sarah coordinated the route change with headquarters while guiding the team through alternative terrain. The detour took them through more difficult ground, including steep hills and rocky terrain that was slippery from the rain. Sarah found herself struggling with the weight of her equipment pack, but she refused to ask for help or show any signs of weakness. Williams, who was walking behind her, occasionally offered quiet words of encouragement but never suggested that she couldn't handle the load. By evening, the team had covered 25 miles and reached a defensible position where they could rest for a few hours. Sarah immediately established communication with headquarters to report their progress and receive updated intelligence about enemy movements in their area. "Alpha Team, Base Command. Be advised that enemy patrol activity has increased in your sector. Recommend maximum stealth protocols for remaining movement." As the team prepared for a few hours of rest, Thompson approached Sarah with something that looked almost like an apology in his expression. "Martinez, I need to tell you something. When you first arrived, I didn't think you belonged here. I thought you were going to be a liability that would put the rest of us at risk." Sarah looked up from her equipment maintenance, waiting for him to continue. "I was wrong," he continued. "Over the past few days, you've proven that you're not just capable of keeping up with us. You're making us better as a team. Your communication skills during that infiltration yesterday probably saved the mission. Thank you, Thompson. That means a lot coming from you. I want you to know that if we were in a real combat situation, I'd trust you to have my back. That's not something I say lightly." The conversation was interrupted by Chen, who had been monitoring radio communications. "We've got a problem," he announced quietly. "I'm picking up chatter that suggests enemy forces are setting up roadblocks along our planned route. We're going to need to make some major adjustments." Captain Johnson studied the map while Sarah worked with her communication equipment to gather more intelligence from headquarters. The situation was becoming more complex, requiring real-time decision-making and coordination that would test every aspect of their training. "Base Command, this is Alpha Team," Sarah transmitted. "We need current intelligence on enemy positions along routes Baker and Charlie. Our primary route is compromised." The response revealed that multiple enemy units were actively searching for their team, having apparently detected signs of their presence in the area. The exercise had escalated to a level of realism that closely simulated actual combat conditions. "This is what separates good units from great ones," Captain Johnson told the team. "When everything goes wrong and the original plan falls apart, can you adapt and still complete the mission?" Sarah spent the next hour working with headquarters to identify alternative routes, while the rest of the team prepared for a night movement that would be far more dangerous than originally planned. They would need to cover 35 miles in darkness while avoiding multiple enemy patrols and reaching the extraction point by dawn. The night march was the most challenging experience of Sarah's military career to that point. Moving through unfamiliar terrain in complete darkness while carrying heavy equipment required intense concentration and trust in her teammates. She navigated using night vision equipment and GPS coordinates, constantly checking their position and communicating with headquarters about their progress. Around 3 in the morning, the team encountered their most serious challenge yet. They had successfully avoided 2 enemy patrols, but found themselves approaching a river crossing that was being watched by a 3rd patrol. The water was running high from the recent rains and the bridge was under enemy observation. "We can't go around," Captain Johnson determined after studying the situation. "The detour would add 6 hours to our route and we don't have that much time. We're going to have to cross here and deal with the patrol." Sarah coordinated with headquarters while the team developed a plan for neutralizing the enemy observation post and crossing the river safely. Her communication skills would be critical during the operation, as she would need to coordinate between multiple elements while maintaining contact with command. The river crossing operation required split-second timing and flawless execution. Sarah guided Williams and Thompson as they approached the enemy position from 2 different directions, while Chen provided overwatch and Captain Johnson coordinated the overall assault. When the engagement began, Sarah's clear communication and precise coordination allowed the team to overwhelm the enemy patrol quickly and efficiently. As dawn approached and the extraction point came into view, Sarah realized that she had successfully completed one of the most demanding training exercises in the military. More importantly, she had earned the complete respect and trust of her teammates through demonstrated competence under the most challenging conditions possible. 6 months after the successful completion of the training exercise, Sarah had become an integral part of Alpha Reconnaissance Unit. Her reputation for excellence in communications and tactical coordination had spread throughout Fort Harrison, and she was frequently called upon to assist with planning for real-world missions. The skepticism and doubt that had initially greeted her arrival were now distant memories, replaced by genuine respect from colleagues throughout the base. On a crisp autumn morning, Sarah was working in the unit's operations center when Captain Johnson approached her desk with a serious expression. Behind him walked a woman in full colonel's uniform, her bearing radiating authority and confidence. Sarah immediately stood at attention, recognizing the significance of the moment. "Lieutenant Martinez," Captain Johnson said formally, "I'd like you to meet Colonel Patricia Williams, the new base commander. She's here to discuss your recent performance evaluations and some upcoming opportunities." Colonel Williams extended her hand with a warm smile. "Lieutenant Martinez, I've been hearing impressive things about your work with Alpha Unit. Captain Johnson tells me you've exceeded every expectation since arriving at Fort Harrison." "Thank you, Colonel. It's an honor to serve with this unit. Walk with me, Lieutenant. I'd like to discuss your future." As they walked through the base, Colonel Williams explained that she had been following Sarah's progress closely. The successful training exercise had been observed by senior military officials, and Sarah's performance had been noted in reports that reached the highest levels of command. "The military is changing, Lieutenant," Colonel Williams explained as they walked past groups of soldiers engaged in various training activities. "We're recognizing that diversity in our leadership ranks isn't just about fairness. It's about operational effectiveness. Different perspectives and experiences make us stronger as a fighting force." They stopped at a bench overlooking the training grounds where Sarah had first proven herself months earlier. Colonel Williams sat down and gestured for Sarah to join her. "I'm going to be direct with you, Martinez. Your performance over the past 6 months has been exceptional, not just for a new officer, not just for a woman, but exceptional by any standard. You've demonstrated technical competence, leadership potential, and the ability to perform under pressure." Sarah felt a surge of pride, but maintained her professional composure. "Thank you, Colonel. I've had excellent mentors and teammates." "Yes, you have, but you've also worked harder than anyone expected. and exceeded standards that many experienced officers struggle to meet. That's why I'm here to discuss your next assignment. Colonel Williams pulled out a manila folder and handed it to Sarah. Inside were orders for a specialized training program that would prepare her for advanced reconnaissance, missions, and potential command responsibilities. The program was highly selective, typically reserved for officers with years of experience and proven track records in combat situations. This is the Advanced Leadership Development Program, Colonel Williams explained. It's a 12-month course that combines advanced tactical training with leadership development and strategic planning. Graduates typically become unit commanders within 2 years. Sarah stared at the documents, hardly believing what she was reading. The program was legendary within military circles, known for producing some of the most effective leaders in the armed forces. Being selected after less than a year of active duty was almost unprecedented. Colonel, I'm honored by this opportunity, but I have to ask, am I ready for this level of responsibility? Colonel Williams smiled. That question tells me you're exactly the right person for this program. Overconfidence is dangerous in military leadership. Thoughtful self-assessment and willingness to continue learning are signs of potential greatness. They were interrupted by the sound of familiar voices approaching. Sarah turned to see Williams, Thompson, Chen, and several other members of Alpha Unit walking toward them. Captain Johnson was with them, and all of them were wearing dress uniforms instead of their typical field gear. What's going on? Sarah asked, confused by the formal appearance of her teammates. Lieutenant Martinez, Captain Johnson announced with a broad smile. By order of Fort Harrison Command, you are hereby promoted to the rank of First Lieutenant, effective immediately. The ceremony that followed was small but meaningful. Colonel Williams administered the oath while Sarah's teammates and several other base personnel served as witnesses. As the new rank insignia was pinned to her uniform, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility and the satisfaction of achievement. First Lieutenant Martinez, Colonel Williams said formally, your new orders include immediate assignment to the Advanced Leadership Development Program, followed by a return to Fort Harrison as Executive Officer of Alpha Reconnaissance Unit. The celebration afterward took place at the base club, where Sarah was surrounded by colleagues who had become like family over the past months. Williams, who had been her most skeptical teammate initially, raised a toast that brought tears to her eyes. 6 months ago, I thought this woman was going to be a liability, he announced to the gathered group. I was wrong about a lot of things. Martinez doesn't just belong in this unit. She's made all of us better soldiers. She's proven that excellence has nothing to do with where you come from or what you look like, and everything to do with dedication, skill, and character. Thompson nodded in agreement. In the field, there's only one thing that matters. Can you do the job when lives are on the line? Martinez has answered that question definitively. She's someone I'd follow into any situation. Chen, who had been her first friend and mentor, spoke last. What impresses me most about Martinez isn't just her technical skills or her physical capabilities. It's her ability to make everyone around her perform better. That's the mark of a natural leader. As the evening wound down, Sarah stepped outside to call her parents and share the news. Her father's voice was filled with pride as she described the promotion and her selection for the advanced program. Mija, you've accomplished something remarkable, he said. But remember, this is just the beginning. The real measure of a leader isn't in the achievements you earn for yourself, but in the success you help others achieve. Standing alone under the starlit sky, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The doubt and skepticism she had faced seemed like ancient history now, replaced by confidence in her abilities and excitement about the challenges ahead. The next morning, Sarah returned to the operations center to begin preparing for her departure to the advanced program. On her desk, she found a note from Captain Johnson that would stay with her throughout her career. Lieutenant Martinez, when you first arrived here, I saw potential. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly that potential would develop into genuine excellence. You've not only proven yourself worthy of this unit, you've raised the standards for everyone who will follow. The future of military leadership is in good hands with officers like you leading the way. As Sarah packed her belongings and prepared for the next phase of her career, she knew that her experiences at Fort Harrison had fundamentally changed her. She had arrived as a young officer trying to prove herself in a challenging environment. She was leaving as a proven leader with the skills, confidence, and respect necessary to take on greater responsibilities. The Locker room conversations and skeptical glances that had marked her early days were now replaced by genuine respect from colleagues who had witnessed her growth and achievements. She had not only earned her place among the elite soldiers of Alpha Reconnaissance Unit, she had demonstrated that excellence in military service was about character, competence, and dedication rather than traditional expectations or preconceived notions. The story of Second Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had become the story of First Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, a leader whose future in military service was limited only by her own ambitions and the opportunities that lay ahead.